I'm going to be speaking in out of Job today. Actually, it's a kind of a difficult book of the Bible, but have you? So something I've always thought's kind of neat, and I don't know if y'all have ever done this before, but you ever had some issue that you're facing, and you ask God for an answer, so like, ask God for something, and you just flip it open and you just start reading, and I've found more times often than not. I mean, even if it's something you've already read before, it's weird how it works because it hits different. Like that this particular time that you're reading that verse in Matthew or Mark or Acts or whatever you may be reading, it hits different, and because of whatever you're going through. So it's just always neat to me that this book has it's a collaboration of stories and experiences and answers. For just about anything in your life, well, really for anything in your life. So, I think there's literally a life lesson for every situation, even for the tough questions. And the Bible's not afraid to answer that. It teaches you the right and wrong way to live, and how to deal with pain and suffering. People have been dealing with suffering of every shape and form, since the beginning when Adam and Eve were sent from the garden. Sickness, famine, hunger, loss, loss of love, floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, storms, hurricanes. There's lots of things in there that can cause suffering and loss in life. A lot of times it seems like when one storm passes in your life, sometimes it's just one right there ready to hit you again. So sometimes you may not want to, but you catch yourself questioning and asking, why would a loving God allow you to hurt like that? So one of the oldest stories in history is about a man named Job. And Rick's not here today, but Rick and I always have a joke because Rick made the mistake one time and he prayed for the patience of Job. Yeah, so we have an ongoing joke because if you've read Job once, twice, a few times, that's a type of patience that it just doesn't exist. And they always say be careful what you ask for because you don't. It's not the way God works. You can't ask God for patience and He just makes you patient. He's going to give you opportunities to be patient. So I was working on this sermon. I saw someone make a comment that Job suffered so much that no mother on earth would ever again name her son Job after reading that story about what he endured for his faith. And the way that he dealt with suffering has been an inspiration throughout history. Every time that somebody has turned to the Bible for answers. Job responded to his suffering with a faith, it's just far surpassed by any standards today, and it really begs the question, how would you or I respond to a similar situation, something of this magnitude, to be tested like that? The world around you is falling apart, everything you knew and loved is being taken from you, would you still choose to be faithful to God? Would you choose faith just as Job did when he was battling with suffering from the beginning, and the metaphorical storm was far, far from over, even in the beginning? Sometimes the biggest battle comes after the storm has passed. So I want to start in Job chapter 1. We're going to start at the beginning. Read the whole thing. It'll be 1 through 22. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And therefore were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household. So this man was the greatest of all men in the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses every one his day, and sent and called for the 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feastings were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. So you've got Job, that's this man that is near perfect, is what God is saying, but his sons and daughters, he sees that there is fault in them, but just like any parent would, they want good for their kids despite what they're doing. So he's going out, he's praying, he's making these offerings to God on their behalf because they continue to live the way they do. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present excuse me. Sorry, I lost my spot.
Verse 6.
Yeah, okay, so now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence came thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord, and there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and there came a messenger unto Job, and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabines fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and he hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and have consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The Chaldeans made out of 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I am only escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came another, and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I am only escaped alone to tell thee. Then Job arose, and rent his mantle, and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground, and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. It doesn't say that this was spaced out over a couple of days. This happened one thing after another after another. If you could get hit with bad news, this was it tenfold. Job was nearly crushed with the pain of suffering. I mean, he tore off his robe, he shaved his head, he fell to the ground when he heard that his children had died. And any parent knows that's a loss that a parent should never have to bury their child. So you can imagine the amount of pain that he's in. The oxen, the asses, the sheep, and the camels all taken, the servants killed. And all this came at the same time before he even had a moment to process one thing before it led into another and another. But why did all this happen if Job was such a good, loyal servant of God? But look again, let's look back to verses 6 through 12. The Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord saith unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made a hedge about him and his house, and about all that he hath on every side? that thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. Put forth now thy hand, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. The Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath in thy power, only upon himself, but not thine hand. So Satan went from the presence of the Lord. You know, it's almost like a Charlie Daniels song. It's almost like a bet between, this is what it comes across as. It kind of comes across as a bet between God and the devil. I bet you I can make your faithful servant sin. I bet you if I take away all the good in his life, that I can destroy him. So it seems kind of, and God sat humbly by for this. So when you're reading this, it is easy. It's easy to say, man, what was God thinking? What was he doing? God gave the devil only one rule, and that he could not touch Job. The devil could do harm as he saw fit to Job's family and his possessions, but the boundary of protection was on Job himself, on Job's life. So why was the devil allowed to harm Job's family? It says right in verse 5 that Job's sons were sinners and cursed God in their hearts, but that Job got up every morning to give offerings in favor of them. Job himself may have been upright and perfect, but there are a lot of people that they hear stories from the Old Testament, and they ask why God always killed innocent people to make a point or punish people. And this is what I have to respond to that. Who's without sin? If you're not without sin, then you're not innocent. God does not kill innocent people. Now, there's a Bible study questionnaire while I was reading this, and one of the questions it asked was, if you'd been Job, how would you have reacted to all these losses? Now, and it said, what might be the greatest question? What would be your greatest question to God in this? And I started to answer that question, and I sat there. I sat there, and I would start to write, and I asked myself, am I being honest with how I'm going to respond to this? Like, I'm really questioning myself. I want to give the answer, saying yes. I would have done as Job did and asked God to forgive me of my sins, and I wouldn't question at all while these horrible things have been happening. In the knowledge that God loves me and loves me more than even my life. But am I being honest if I was to write that? If your faith gets tested to that extent, was I being honest to answer that way? And believe me, in no way would I ever want to be tested to the extent to feel that kind of suffering, but I do believe I'd pray for God's strength and for things to get better. But whenever you're hit with that kind of loss, especially the loss of your children, how a person reacts, even in the moment, that's difficult. So I don't know. I couldn't answer that question. I tried, and I could not answer that question. Not and be honest. I honestly wonder why Job didn't die of heartbreak. But look what Job did instead. Look at verses 20 through 22 again. Job arose, he rent his mantle, and he shaved his head, fell down upon the ground and worshipped and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed the name of the Lord. Even on all this, he didn't sin. Didn't curse God. How is it that man can choose such great faith and still feel such great pain? How else could it be? If we take the risk of loving those around us, this is where the caveat is. If we take the risk of experiencing love in our lives, then you're going to experience loss. And the grief will be tremendous when you experience that loss. But the alternative to grief is to never love at all. And so I think Job knew that's not an alternative. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. We continue into chapter 2. I'm going to read 1 through 13. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although you movest me against him, to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal. So a potsherd, like he took a piece of pottery. He hurt so bad, he took a broken piece of pottery to scrape those boils. He was covered from head to toe. To scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. He then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thy integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come down upon him, they came from every one his own place. Eliphaz, I'm going to mess these names up, I always do. Eliphaz, Temanite, Bildad, Shuhite, and Zophar, and Nemathite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn him and comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. And they rent every one his mantle, sprinkled dust upon their heads towards heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was great. Again, we see Job got tested. Even after all he went through the first time, this time, the devil was allowed to cause physical harm to him. And yes, God did allow that. God did allow it to happen. He said, you're not allowed to take his life, though. His physical ailments were so bad that he used the broken pottery to do a kind of an in-home surgery. His wife basically asked him, why do you keep your integrity and faith, and why not just curse God and die? But Job still remained patient and tells her that she speaks foolishly, and that you can't expect God, to allow good in your life and not allow some evil. Because even in this painful test, Job did not sin with his lips. His friends came and sat with him for 7 days without talking because his grief was so great. Reading this book is very difficult for everybody. It's difficult for me to read, but it's because of what the story is. It's the story of this flawless man, near flawless man, and basically how he was tortured while God sat in the stands, trying to see how much of the beating he can take. It's hard to like anything about this story, when God has a conversation with the enemy. And we don't like God watching from the sidelines. We don't like torture and suffering Job had to endure. It doesn't make any sense to us. It's not a satisfying story. But that's kind of part of the point, though, isn't it? That suffering doesn't make sense either, but the natural expectation in life is spelled out in the first paragraph of Job. We want for every new baby a good family, a good childhood, a good education, eventually fulfilling and well-compensated job, a good home or retirement, a perfect life. We want the first paragraph of Job for our kids, for our families, and for those around us. Job was a blameless, an upright, and righteous man, and the greatest man amongst his people, and he was a man who did something we'd all like to do without, and he was a man without suffering. He wasn't doing without. He was very blessed by God. But in the midst of this relationship, faith is still an option, even as it appears illogical to choose faith. Choosing faith in the midst of suffering, as Job did, it may look like insanity to watch, but Job's friends tried mightily to find logic while they looked at a logical comparison of his faith in great suffering. I mean, Job's wife certainly didn't think highly of her husband's nonsensical faith at the time. Her only lines in the book, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." Despite all these reasons why Job might not have chosen faith in the midst of his suffering, he chose faith anyway. And by doing so, he made the better choice. He survived his grief. His choices illustrate the wonderful things faith will do for us if we make the choice in faith amidst that suffering. What a tough choice. When we choose faith, we must trust the very God who allows difficult circumstances in our life in the first place. But once again, look carefully at the story. The only being in complete control of all events is God. Throughout the entire event, God's always in control. Choosing faith doesn't allow God to be in control. It only reminds us that this truth has always been and always will be. If you study the conversation between God and Satan, Job would have struggled with the conversation. I mean, if he'd had that conversation, or if he'd known about that conversation, he probably would have struggled with it, knowing that it happened. Probably wouldn't have liked the conversation. It would have made sense to him, but there's no doubt that the conversation was crystal clear to God. God knew he had that much faith in Job. He wasn't tricked by Satan. God carefully weighs the options of everything in your life. He considers the ramifications, and a choice is made, but no time was God out of control. Now, anyone can sing a song of praise during good days. We all have. It takes a person of tremendous faith and tremendous spiritual maturity to sing those same songs on the bad days. If you can pull it off, you will give God a precious gift of worship that will be unlike any gift you would ever have given him. Job was wise enough to know that God had control in the good days and the success of his life, just as surely as God was now controlling the bad days. Beyond that, Job learned the lesson that must be remembered in a time of suffering. Nothing about your present circumstances, be they good or bad, have changed the first thing about the nature of God. God's still the same today, just as he was yesterday. He will be the same tomorrow and forever. And that God is worthy of praise. If you bow your heads with me. Loving God, I thank you for the strength you give me even when I feel overwhelmed by suffering. I know that through trials I can grow and learn, and I pray that I might find courage to face my challenges with faith and hope. May your presence be a source of comfort and strength, especially during times of pain and difficulty. Please guide me, support me, and help me to remember that even in the darkest moments, I am not alone. I trust in your love and mercy, and I pray for the wisdom to learn from my experiences and perseverance to continue on my journey of healing and recovery. May my suffering be a testimony to your love and grace. In your holy Son, Jesus' name I pray. Amen.